profiteert Tadic en schiet Ziyech net als 3 weken terug in de arena binnen en leidt Ajax in Bernabeu.
Ajax in de aanval. Bal voor het doel. En Neres!
Ja!
Neres!
Ja!
Neres scoort 2-0!
Ja!
Doelpunt Ajax!
Doelpunt Ajax! Dusan Tadic schiet Ajax naar de kwartfinale van de Champions League.
72e minuut. Lasse Schöne trapt.
Trap Lasse Schöne in de 72e minuut. Lasse Schöne met zijn specialiteit.
Yeah, so they're pretty excited, as you might imagine. David Winner is on the line, author of Brilliant Orange, the neurotic genius of Dutch football. They are very happy, David.
They sounded a bit depressed to me.
This was obviously a bad performance from Real Madrid in many respects, but that would be taken away from what was a brilliant performance by Ajax. I mean, a genuinely signature, traditional, brilliant Ajax performance. They were sensationally good.
Yes. I don't disagree with a word of that. I was watching the game actually with a Spanish friend, Alejandro, who's a Real Madrid fan, and he was sort of moaning, not with pleasure, all through the game. And I was kind of seeing it through his eyes a bit, that it was all about, you know, how much of a mess Real were and how much they were missing Ramos and all of that. But it was brilliant from Ajax. I thought they were, you know, it was rekindling memories from more than 20 years ago.
It was
the great Ajax team in the mid-90s, and some memories before that as well.
Yeah.
It was sensational.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't really seen Dusan Tadic play much football since he left Southampton, but that is a different Dusan Tadic. And I was wondering, is this just what he does now? But even he said after the game, I'm pretty sure that's the best match I've ever played in my life.
Yeah, well, it looked it. It was unrecognisable from the Southampton guy. He and Hakim Ziyech seemed to have formed a really sort of telepathic bond almost immediately. It said that, you know, the first time they trained together, it was there, and it was in evidence last night. And then Tadic, some of the stuff he was doing, the little pirouette before the assist for the second goal, was extraordinary. It was Maradona-like. Remarkable.
Yeah, it was one of those evenings. So, like, not to ask too broad a question, but how has this happened? is one of the initial thoughts we've all had. Yeah. So talk to us about this season. I mean, was this performance coming?
They absolutely outplayed Madrid in the first game and were done by a very odd piece of refereeing and bad luck, and then in the end a bit of naivety and bad finishing. It was all a combination of all those things. But I mean, it was clearly the better team in Amsterdam. And then Ramos getting himself booked because he arrogantly thought he didn't need to play in the second leg. He was saving himself for the quarterfinal. Clearly unhinged the Madrid defence, and they're in all sorts of trouble anyway. And nobody in Amsterdam expected that, nevertheless. And if you'd asked at the beginning of the season, nobody would have been certified. It would have been an absurd thing to predict.
Yeah.
Much the same as happened with the national team. This time, well, not even this time, a year ago, around World Cup time, all the talk in Holland was, you know, how far they've fallen, we'll never get back. You know, look at Belgium romping to the semi-finals in the World Cup. We're nowhere near that. And suddenly, both the national team and Ajax, and there's always been, you know, a very strong correlation between the two. If Ajax has a great team, then the national team is good very soon afterwards. And it's all happening in, you know, double speed. Very strange. Yeah. Why is it happening? Part of the reason, I think, is they were able to hang on to some key players who would, in normal circumstances, you know, the last 10, 15 years would have expected to leave. And in fact, the only guy who really mattered who left at the beginning of the season was Justin Kluivert, son of Patrick, who was considered a great talent, but has more or less disappeared into the Roma reserves. And David Neres came in instead, and he's better. And they signed Tadic, and Ziyech didn't leave. and De Ligt, who he was the sort of seen to be the junior partner in that team that went to the Europa League final 2 years ago. And when he was only 17, and he's matured, still only 19 or so, and he's become one of the great young prospects in any position in the world.
Yeah.
And so he's maturing at an extraordinary rate. And you've suddenly got a kind of nucleus of not quite callow, they're sort of a little bit matured. And then on top of that, you've got Daley Blind, who's now been around a bit, Tadic, who's having this sort of wonderful Indian summer, Lasse Schöne, who's I think 30 now. So you've got a nice blend of ages and experience. And they're playing in this very aggressive, there's sort of two schools of Ajax play. There's the kind of endless passing Van Gaal model, and the more Cruyffian pressing and aggression and attack. And this is Cruyffian that we saw last night. Amazing.
Yeah, it was Cruyffian. And so am I to take from that then that very much the Cruyff way has won over the Van Gaal way at Ajax now? That is very much what they're implementing?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. It's a more exciting brand of football, that's for sure.
Sorry?
It's a more exciting brand of football, that's for sure.
Yes, it is. It had become a sort of parody of itself, this endless possession to no great effect, sideways passing all the time. Frankie de Jong who had also an extraordinary game yesterday. He very rarely plays a sideways pass. He's nearly always either running or passing in front of him. And he's maturing into an extraordinary player.
Yeah, it was almost, even as it unfolded in real time, it was almost tinged with a degree of worry or sadness, because we know de Jong is obviously going, De Ligt is living up to his billing every time he plays on this stage. And right before your eyes, as you were enjoying the performance, you were also looking at which players would be stripped for parts pretty much in the summer. There's probably that horrible fear that this might be as good as it gets for this group.
I think it probably is, yeah. I mean, it's not there's no outstanding teams in the competition. And if they can do that to Real Madrid, I think they could possibly go all the way. It's a very, very long shot, I'd have thought. But people are beginning to think that. But after that, like the 95-96 team, it will be broken up for sure. But it will come as less of a shock. The Ajax, in a way, never really recovered from that until now. They are expecting it, and they're not going to be too bitter about it. And they point, for example, to Donny van der Beek, who had a terrific game again yesterday, who is kind of only in the team because Davy Klaassen, who was the captain and one of the focal points of the 2 years ago team that got to the Europa final, because he left, that meant that Van der Beek could develop in a way that he probably wouldn't have done if Klaassen had stayed. Klaassen's proud story at Everton is another matter. But yeah, no, everybody's expecting them to go. Yeah, at least 2 or 3 or 4 of them to go.
Ten Hag even made an interesting point about the way the club are developing players now, that they've had to recognise that they have to work faster with players, that players aren't even staying in Dutch football, the best players, until the age of 23 or 24. He said they're leaving at 20 or 21. So at 18 or 19, they need to be ready to play in the first team, is the point he made. And, De Ligt came through as a 16-year-old. So that's part of the way at Ajax now, is to get them playing younger and younger. Overmars is the director of football. Van der Sar is CEO and he's marketing director. In the absence of Cruyff now, he's been obviously deceased a couple of years. In the absence of Cruyff, who's the real driving force behind the development of the latest batch of Ajax players?
It's more Overmars than Van der Sar. And don't over-egg or over-sentimentalise the Ajax Youth Academy role in this. Because I think only 4 of the team last night are from the Toekomst, which is the name for the Ajax Youth setup. Yeah. So Mazraoui, Daley Blind, who also had that, fell away. De Ligt, of course, and Donny van der Beek. That's it. all the others were kind of bought in either very recently or not so recently. Frankie de Jong, for example, he grew up at Willem II.
Yeah.
Willem II, which is not a fabled academy. And he's the most talented of the lot to a degree. And it's also, we forget that when Cruyff came in and took over in 2011, there was practically blood on the streets. It was absolutely a bitter, terrible experience for everybody at the club. A lot of the coaches who he despised, but were actually rather good youth coaches, went elsewhere. And some are arguing that it's not because of Cruyff, it's despite Cruyff. That the youth system has taken years to recover, in effect, from that revolution. So, the great legend of the Ajax youth system, be a little bit cautious of that. It's part of it, but it's not the factory the producing geniuses that we like to think it is.
Okay, so are they almost just hoovering up the best underage talent in the country?
Yeah, that's part of it. But there's also, Neres is from Sao Paulo. He's Brazilian.
Yeah.
Lasse Schöne's been around a lot. Tadic, who was the sort of main man last night, he has really no connection with Ajax before this season. So I think he was at Groningen and NEC, can't remember, but he was so it's not partly because the Ajax method went out into the rest of Dutch football and everybody copied it. Everybody started playing 4-3-3. That became the Ajax way, became the national way. Ten Hag himself, as he spent time at Bayern and at Utrecht. So he's, it's not only, this genius factory in Amsterdam.
Yes.
It's more complex than that.
Yeah, fair point. And they have loosened the purse strings to a degree. They are paying a bit more in terms of wages, which, let's not understate the importance of money in all this. Yes.
So that's Overmars doing, that they had this sort of €1 million a year cap. And they've relaxed that a bit, and the main people, Ziyech, Tadic, De Jong, I think, will be earning a fair bit more than that, and that was part of the reason that the parts of the team stayed together for this season. Rory Smith had a nice piece in the New York Times about Ten Hag sitting 7 of the main players down and showing them a video of old stars and saying, "You're like this guy, you're like that guy." They didn't leave immediately, when they were 19 or 20. They stayed for a bit, and it helped them, and it helped their careers, and it helped them become better players. Bergkamp, Cruyff, Van Basten were all solidly into their 20s before they left.
Yeah.
And some of the guys who've gone very young have not flourished elsewhere. They've had sort of mediocre careers or rubbish careers and been forgotten about. So they're adapting all the time to its very harsh financial situation. The economic reality is that they're in the Europe, compared to the big leagues and the big clubs, they're very small financially, small. So they have to sort of duck and dive a bit.
Yeah, of those younger players that Ten Hag sat down and showed videos to, likening them to legends, I think Clivert Jr. was the only one of that group that did depart. And as you say, it's not like he's lighting things up in Rome just yet. It is difficult to make a move and flourish instantly. That said, De Ligt looks like he's capable of flourishing anywhere, frankly. Is there any obvious line on where he's most likely to end up at this stage, or is that still very much open?
Everybody thought he was going to Barcelona, and that seems to be on the back burner again. Right. We don't know. He was linked with PSG not so long ago.
Oh,
that also
don't go there.
I don't know. The world is his oyster.
Yeah.
And I hope he doesn't go to PSG. I think that would be a mistake. If he'd like to come to Arsenal, I say come to. I have no connection with them. But, that'd be welcome. It won't happen.
Yeah. Money tends to talk. And I guess, they're bringing in all this young talent, and it's not just Dutch talent. and ultimately it has to be knitted together in some way. So how highly do we rate Ten Hag? As you mentioned, he was at Bayern with their reserve side for a while, and Utrecht, and he spent some time with Guardiola at Bayern. Is he? He's clearly a disciple to some degree or other of Cruyff, but he's doing a good job.
Yes, well, he's terrific, and he was unheralded, rather unknown, even not terribly well known around Holland, even.
Right.
And he's sort of crept in under the radar and making a name for himself. In due course, or not very due, he'll probably be poached by somebody as well. Peter Bosz, who was go back 2 years. This is practically Peter Bosz's story. A coach that wasn't hugely well known came in and transformed what seemed to be a quite average group of players and laid the basis really for what's happening now. And then he fell out with Dennis Bergkamp, who at the time was very powerful at Ajax. Bergkamp, and then Peter Bosz left, went to Dortmund, and but quite soon afterwards, Marcel Kaiser and Bergkamp, who was his number 2 at that point, were sacked because they fell out. Bergkamp had fallen out with his old teammates, Overmars and Van der Sar. And so he's come in, he's repaired the damage that was done by that period. There was also a tragedy in the summer of 17. Api Nouri, who was this very talented young guy who had a heart attack and then brain damage. And he was very popular and much loved in the club. And his life was nearly over. He's in hospital now permanently, and that hung like a great shadow over the club as well for a while, and dampened the mood. And suddenly we're where we are now. It's odd, and happy surprise for everybody.
Yeah, it sure is. There was something romantic about seeing Ajax back and doing it on a European stage at the Bernabeu. I think everybody was enjoying it. I guess one of the kind of interesting questions is how sustainable this might be. Are Ajax, and you may not have a simple answer to this, it's not a simple question, but are Ajax back to a point where they can lose the really outstanding talents like De Ligt and De Jong here and there, and yet maintain some kind of presence in the knockout stages of the Champions League? Are they back to a point, if the Cruyffian revolution was around 2011, have they got to a point now where it's some way sustainable and they can withstand to lose the really great talents here and there and still be in our lives in the knockout stages? That's kind of what we're all interested in, I suppose, at this juncture.
We don't know. It looks unlikely.
Right.
I would expect, if assuming they lose De Ligt, it's going to certainly go Frankie de Jong. I would imagine Tadic might stay. Ziyech might stay. There isn't an obvious production line of super talent coming through. Still less than super talent mature enough to perform as well as this at this level. Though I'm told that roughly the 15-year-olds, another sort of 3-4 years, there's some phenomenal players coming through at that age. I'm sad to have to say that I don't expect this to be repeated next season.
Okay, we'll enjoy it while it lasts. Listen, David, thanks for your time.
Yes.
As you might imagine, there's plenty of fans in the office of Brilliant Orange and your other book, so it's great to have you on.
Thank you. My pleasure.